So Jill, I turn the panel over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and welcome everybody. And if anybody wants to move down, we're going to have a really casual discussion here. If you noticed, I have strategically placed myself in between Alan and Hal, and we have already laid the ground rules that I am going to cut them off when I feel that they might be going on too long, and that is in the most respectful manner. We have lots of different areas that we want to be able to cover, and for the last 10 minutes, we are going to open it up to Q&A, and we would just ask that everybody please just state your name, your organization, and your question so that we can try and get as many questions in as possible. So we have, I think that, you know, these gentlemen need no necessary introduction, but I will, Alan, CEO of Silvercup, and Hal, President and CEO of Kaufman Astoria. And, you know, the first question when I met each of you, the question that always circulates in my mind is, do you think of yourselves as an entertainment company, or do you think of yourselves as real estate company?
I think of ourselves.
I don't know.
I think of ourselves primarily as a real estate company that has a sidebar that is a major part of it, which is a studio operation, and how you are able to utilize an industry like ours as an anchor in which to develop a neighborhood. And I think that was what our real goal was, and to really grow the production capability, not only here at Kaufman, but in New York in general, and then use that really to, as you walk around here, so you did the Museum of the Moving Image and its growth, the movie theater. I think the big deal for us was when we brought Starbucks in. It satisfied the producer, who kept asking me, just like in the movies, where's the nearest Starbucks? And also helped give credibility to this as an avenue that the neighborhood would want to come to.
So actually, that's a very interesting point. Do you feel that actually when you were able to bring Starbucks in, that was a turning point for Long Island City and your business?
Well, I got told this by someone else, and they said to me when we opened up Starbucks that you now brought credibility to the area. And I went, not the movie theater, not the museum, not the studio, and they went, no, the little 1,200-foot Starbucks. And I'm not sure he was wrong.
And what year was that?
Oh, Saul, when did we do that?
Probably 11 years ago.
Huh, interesting. Okay. Alan, my dear?
We weren't quite so aspirational as Mr. Rosenbluth and George Kaplan. Stuart and Mine's father went to contract to buy the original Silvercup bakery building right around January of 1980. And you know, he was looking to relocate a couple of his manufacturing businesses into one particular location. But he still had all this space left over. I was practicing as an architect up in Boston at the time, and he was trying to figure out a way to get me back to New York. And I guess I could, sitting here today, I'm saying he succeeded. I commuted for a year, going from Boston to New York, trying to not make the move. I did not succeed in that. And it all worked out, you know, pretty well. But one of the ideas about how to use the rest of the building were film and television sound stages, which George Kaufman, you know, Hal's more senior partner, was doing over here. I actually thought it was the dumbest idea that I had ever heard. But we went ahead, we tried it, we built one studio, then we built another to see, you know, where these things going to get used. And you know, the second studio that we built, we found that it was busy in its first 6 months of operation every single day of the week, with the exception of Thanksgiving Day, Christmas Day, and New Year's Day. So we said, okay, maybe this is a business. And then we went off from there.
So what business is it, though, in your mind?
It's a real estate business, but it's a specialty real estate business. And it's a specialty real estate business that requires not just expertise, it requires a lot of equity. And the reason it requires a lot of equity is because at the end of the day, any bankers that are out there and what have you, it's harder for them to wrap their head around this as a business. We have a bank that has crossed that bridge. So yeah, it's a real estate business, and we're also in the real estate development business. We build housing here in Long Island City and have a lot of things going on in the housing world.
So the data point that Hal raised about Starbucks, which I think is a really fascinating point, was there like a moment where you look back and you think, this was the moment that we're taking a turn, and that Silvercup, Long Island City is going to be on a new road and a new trajectory, and it's not as tough, and you're not doing as much educating?
I would say that a turning point for us in a positive was when Barry Diller decided to locate, at the time when he was in partnership with the Robertses at Cablevision, Home Shot. Well, it was QVC at the time. And
Gary's nodding, right?
Yeah.
Good one.
Thank you, Gary. And they located this new television channel, which did not ultimately succeed, but it was transformative for us. And then we went on, and over time, our business has changed from the advertising world, which has shrunken quite a bit, and basically we're doing mostly television series. So that's where I'd say it was a pivotal point for us.
And, earlier this morning, Kathy Weil was talking about the fact that both of you and your organizations were foundational in really, build as a building block to the growth of Long Island City. And, today, 30, 50 years later, we are at this incredible kind of nexus. And as you think about the years ahead, and maybe the next generation of leaders that will be coming in, what are the things that you think are critically important, need to either change or remain in place, or maybe a little bit of both, in order to continue to grow and to prosper and to be able to really attract? We're seeing incredible growth. Both of you guys have residential development underway. What do you think those things are?
If I can just answer it and going backward just
Yeah,
a
go
little
ahead.
bit.
But what if I decided to answer it first?
All right, I'm going to give it to Hal because he started
I'm
first.
sorry. No, Starbucks, I'm going back to what happened. So Starbucks was to the local population group a credibility and for this development here. But I think the turning point as an individual running a studio operation through the 80s and the early 90s happened when I was watching Channel 2 News, and they had done they did an interview with Woody Allen's crew members who were on location. And they asked them, well, where are you doing the interiors? And he says, we're shooting at Kaufman. And suddenly we went from being on the other side of the bridge, having to cross the water, to something that was, I'm going to Kaufman because I'm going to shoot. And I think that started to change the education process of what we needed to do in terms of the 59th Street Bridge being a psychological barrier. And I think the same thing happened for Allen. There started to become, for at least the main production industry, we're shooting in at Silvercup, we're shooting at Kaufman, and it started to change things. Things like Silvercup and what's happening with residential, and starts to change that, and we're slowly even starting to see the concept that I'm going to Queens. Mm-hmm. Not I'm going to Astoria, not I'm going to Long Island City, and that's starting to change. And I'm going to give a quick story, and then you can cut me off.
Yeah, no, go.
Okay.
It's good. It's good. No, go ahead.
So
yes.
There was
We'll determine if it's
I'm
funny.
sorry. Okay. For those of you who are in the public relations business, or for those of you who deal with public relations people, you might appreciate this. There was a gentleman that worked for us as an in-house PR person who at one point had worked with 20th Century Fox and had worked with Allen and at Silvercup. His name was Harold Rand. Okay? So
this is going to be good, you guys.
So this is in the mid-'80s, and his office was next to mine.
He's shaking his head, by the way.
And the head of the recording studio was coming up to see me. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and she passes Harold's office, and Harold's sitting at his desk like this. And she says, Harold, are you okay? What's the matter? And he said, I'm exhausted. I've been lying since 8 o'clock this morning. And I think back then, to a great extent, a lot of that kind of exaggeration was what was necessary to get folks to look at Astoria and Long Island City. And so my point becomes today, a lot of what he was talking about, which was sort of an exaggeration, is now really the truth. And I think so we're seeing the progress. And it's not something that happened overnight. Alan and I are both at this since 1980. So it takes some time to go through it. Well, by the way, was that funny? No?
Well, the thought of Harold was very funny.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure.
But that's exactly what he would do. But he was actually trying to be amusing, is what I imagine. Because that was his sense of humor. Actually, to your point, and this is not funny, our first advertisements in a trade publication for the film and television business had a bottom, what do you call it, Jill, a footer or something like that in the ad. And it said 22 blocks from Bloomingdale's.
Oh, wow.
We had to do something people thought we were in Montauk. Long Island City was like some foreign land. Fallujah might be closer. I don't know. But yes, we have gotten over the stigma, in fact, well beyond the stigma, to the point of it's an attractive place to live and work. And I think that our businesses, as well as many of the other businesses that I see represented around here today, which include the culturals and what have you, have really helped to turn all of this stuff around. Now, I don't specifically remember the question that you asked.
Well, the question
No,
I asked,
I don't want you to repeat it.
You're doing
No, I don't want you to repeat it. I'm going to say something else.
Go ahead.
Which is, because you
So
asked
surprised.
you asked about the future. Okay, fair enough?
That was actually my question.
Right. And to me, the future is not necessarily the issue of zoning. It's not necessarily the issue of certain uses. The future is about engagement. And one of the things that we at Silvercup Studios, which includes me, my brother, Gary Kessner over here, and Hal and George in their work over there, is that we have been actively engaged in the Long Island City community for the entire time that we've been here. Okay? And that includes things like what is now the Long Island City Partnership. I still fondly call it the LDC, but it was, it had different iterations over time. To the cultural side of life, my brother is co-chairman of this institution here. I'm a past chairman of the Queens Museum. Stuart's also in Socrates Sculpture Park. Hal and George, well, you can tell them what you do, but it's actually they've been very active in the Sinatra School and this institution over here. And so it's a combination of business items and cultural items and community engagement that the leaders, and I believe we have future leaders sitting in this audience, that's my suggestion. David Browse, he is involved, not on the cultural side yet, but we'll get him there. But that kind of thing, that will speak to the future of where this is going to be.
So let me ask you another question, or maybe rephrase it in a way. If you had a wish list for the mayor for Long Island City, what would be on that? If you had to pick one, Alan, because we have a limited amount of time.
Yeah. It would just be something I said in an earlier panel or two this morning, which is not to be singularly focused on affordable housing, but to look at combining affordable housing, affordable commercial and industrial space vertically, just like finance people talk about the capital stack, so that we can continue to have the rich business, living, and cultural environment that we have.
And Hal?
Can I have two?
Yes, sure.
One relates really.
And I'm curious if
Well, one
debate
relates
also.
more specifically to the industry that Alan and I are in. There is a film tax credit program done by the state of New York that incentivizes producers to come here. The city's studies show that it has created 130,000 jobs. The state study shows that it has put, in the last 2 years, more than $500 million into the coffers of the city of New York. And I guess what I'm asking from this administration is not to run away from things that help bring business because it's politically insensitive to be in favor of programs like this that actually work and create jobs. And we've seen it in all our studios with crew members that are working almost full time now and buying homes and buying cars and getting married and all the things that happen when people are successfully employed in a business that actually pays a decent wage and a good wage to work. So that would be one, because we tend to see, we have a great commissioner in Cynthia Lopez, but it's just not politically palatable to stay in favor of something that other people have called corporate welfare. The other is, in a way, to kind of, I don't know, I'm going to say this really poorly, but stay out of our own way. I look at life in very common sense that, again, politically doesn't work. You know, I like to think in terms of concentric circles. If I throw a rock into the water, I create this ripple effect that tends to happen. And then if the city comes and helps it along, I put another rock in, and it starts to spread and grow. I think what has happened in the past with the city is we throw the rock in the water, and they don't follow the developers to make sure it all works, and thus we talk now about problems with schools and problems with this, because but I take the rock and I throw it here, and then I go to the other end of the city and I throw another rock in the water. And then I go to the other end of the city and I throw another rock in the water. And the concentric circles never, might catch up to each other, but it will take generations to happen. So I asked them to really take a look and say, all these developers that are doing all this, I think, really good work, and trying to educate communities about change and what they're doing, follow them. Go along and work hand in hand to get some of the stuff, so that with some foresight, so that we see that, wow, if I put all these families into Long Island City, I'm going to have a school issue, or I'm going to have a parking issue, or all of the things that affect the infrastructure and the quality of life. Because if it goes well, we put that other rock next to the same circle, and it starts to grow even further. And so I look, but it's not necessarily that that's a politically correct thing to do. But I think it's the way that development for a city invests in itself, stays at, doesn't hinder the growth, and it moves forward.
How do you think we best amplify that message? I mean, is it a consortium? Is it, individual leaders? Is it, I don't know.
I send Alan.
Well, I would say it's, you have to get the word out in some fashion, which is something Hal and I are working on together. But, and I can only see about 5 rows in front of me because of these lights. But I see, whether it, and this isn't like Shari Lewis, I see this one and that one and what have you. But
Wow, did you just age yourself?
yeah, I know. It's okay.
Is that Lammy?
Yeah, Lammy, right.
Yeah.
Right. Lamb chop.
Oh, lamb chop.
Lamb chop.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
But whether I see Charlie Summers' business over here, Public Service Trucking, or I think of the Queens Museum, or any, the Wearwaces over here, have all rented space or rented things to the folks that we service in the studio business. And what is not necessarily realized and expressed to the body politic, including this mayor and what have you, is how many other businesses this business helps to create and be sustained. I mean, Charlie did not just do film and entertainment, but as we all grew, so did Charlie's business. And so we need to get that, message across to both this mayor and to the body politic, because it really does create jobs. And it's not just the people that are behind the camera. It's these people here that are in this room.
Yeah, I shared actually with both Alan and Hal that at Crain's we produce a show called New York Stories, which runs on NY Life and NYC TV. And I was interviewing a family, Astoria Carpet Time, and I was sitting in this strip mall, and I was a little bit early, and all of a sudden I saw a truck pull up and carpets going in. And then I saw another truck come up, carpets going in, another truck. So within about 20 minutes, there had been, I counted 15, maybe 16 different trucks that were being loaded. And so when I interviewed Eleanor, I said, what's going on? She's like, oh, well, that was this show and this movie. And I mean, the activation is remarkable, from like the pizza shop to the carpet, manufacturer, the prop person, et cetera. And, I think it is a very interesting point, an important point that you mentioned.
It's an industry that brings billions of dollars a year into the city and the state, and it's hard to recognize because they all see Steven Spielberg or Will Smith, but there's all these crew guys and the other businesses that get the ripple effect, the local pizzeria, the local dry cleaner. I mean, you can keep going down the list on how industries impact others.
Yeah, I would just say one other thing, because those are kind of more direct connections, including I should have recognized that when Leslie Nielsen was catering today's lunch, that her chicken salad has onions in it, and I forgot about that because I've had so many of them, and she caters a lot of lunches over at the studio. But more importantly, what I found from real estate folks recently is that some of these new users, I'll call of the creative, innovative, business, the TAMI users and what have you, we've actually over time, because of our presence, have made it much cooler to be here.
That was actually my question. I'm curious how the conversation, you travel to LA, you're calling on people, you're traveling to LA. How has that conversation changed over the years?
It's a good question. I don't have an answer. I usually have answers for everything.
It is a good question. I think we have to understand New York, when we started out, was star-driven. And there was a handful of people that they would only work in New York. And that's what you kind of knew when you kept trying to talk to them.
In New York, meaning Manhattan?
Meaning New York City.
New York City, okay.
Again, you talk about ad. Our ad way back in the 80s was a picture of a bagel. And it said, you can't compare shooting in New York to LA. We've got better bagels. And I'd go out to LA back then, and it's, you're right. And I wanted to do a food campaign. I got talked out of. I should have done pizza and knishes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it was really star-driven. What had happened, and this goes back to after 2001 to 2004, other countries and states put tax incentive programs in place, and therefore the cost of shooting here in New York grew dramatically, just because the sheer cost of living in New York is higher. It was really not much other than that. So. And that became a different kind of conversation because the heads of production basically told me, we're not budgeting New York anymore, period. They just weren't going to do it, and they were looking not to hire New York talent that would force the project to be here. And that's when Alan and I and others got together, and we were able to convince the state to do the original tax credit program. And it changed the picture. It taught me something. It taught me that producers would pay a premium to be in New York. But there's a level of what that premium is. And it was really trying to find where that line was that producers would still say, okay, it's worth being in New York. It's worth capturing that on film and hire those actors that live here.
So the premium, setting aside the credits, access to talent, being able to shoot, on location, all of those elements, or are there other things as well that you thought?
Well, what I mean by that is...
But that wasn't enough.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't enough. You needed to have tax policy to help get that. You can
go ahead.
So it was the duality.
Yeah, the one thing that again, this is supposed to be it says the big picture somewhere up there. It is amazing how much tax policy impacts so many different businesses, be it our business, be it the real estate community with what's going on now with 421A and what have you. And people should not think it doesn't matter. That's a double negative, because these things do matter. Without this tax policy coming out of the state of New York for the film and television business, we'd have no business in New York.
No.
The premium would be so high, all right? And the other compelling reasons why they're here, it just is not compelling enough. I'm not going to go into the whole real estate world, but these other, 421A and other kinds of things where you get certain benefits for providing affordable housing, those are really important, because otherwise a lot of these things just would not get built. I mean, we're doing a project now where 20% is going to be affordable condos that people will own, okay? And we could only do that because of tax policy. So the reason I bring it up is that it's very easy for the New York Post to bash the film and television tax credit program. and because it's easy. But the fact is that for every dollar that the state invests, okay, I guess they're going to pull the rug on us, is they get back $1.90. That's a damn good return. So again, if we want people to leave here with a sense of kind of what's going on and what the future looks like, I think that those are important things to know.
Okay.
But, and I'm sorry, but what
Go ahead.
Alan is talking about, it not only applies to the film and television industry, it applies to all aspects of what I call sustainability of the business development that's happened. So what you're talking about is, what do you see happening in the future? I think we have to be really smart to understand that it is businesses like Alan's that help grow a community and help make that happen. It is businesses like Kaufman's that help make an area grow and allow for other people to come and invest into it. But if you don't have the right tax policies and the support of the community and the politicians with leadership that understands that change is hard, and they're going to have to sell that change and take the consequences of it, the sustainability is going to end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a question of capturing kind of the overall economic impact of, because it's this, entertainment is a big umbrella, and then all the different elements of what goes through under it, whether or not it's the small business who is doing catering, whether or not it's the unions who are, the teams. I mean, there's just so many different elements to it. But the other part about it is that you just said that I just want to stick with for 1 second. You talked about how it impacts the community. And one of the things that I think is really neat about each of you is that you both have gone beyond in making investments in the community. And we're sitting here in the museum, which is an extraordinary, I'd say, gift back to the community, and being able, kids love coming here. But the entire area, I mean, there's a cultural renaissance that I think is well underway, and that you've certainly, been an ambassador for leading that. And Alan, you guys, long before, I believe, the word green was cool or people knew about it, you were investing in green roofs. And I guess, those things to me are so important and special in ways that you give back. And I'm curious if there are other things you have up your sleeve, if there's, you're dimensionalizing it, you're very generous with your time and supporting various nonprofits and culturals. What do you personally want to be able to think of as, an overall legacy or gift that you give back?
Well, I don't know that I've thought about legacy, but I'll tell you that, I'm very proud on how busy
Is he
this.
really that old?
Yeah.
No, I mean, but it's like you get
But
to
I think,
different.
I think for us, his
points.
legacy is really George Kaufman's. I mean, he came out here in the late 70s in 1980, and there was literally nothing here. If you imagine, Kaufman Astoria, not for the whole history, but at one point was owned by the Army. And the Army held on to this from 1940 to 1970. In 1970, the Army walks into the mayor of the city of New York and says, "We're leaving." So picture a small manufacturing town somewhere in the Midwest, and the manufacturer leaves. So for this community, even though it's New York City, this small community, here was a place that was thousands of jobs. One day gone. City didn't have the wherewithal to continue what was going on here, and they boarded it up. And so there suddenly not only was jobs gone because the money spent in the local coffee shop or the local restaurant disappeared, but the buildings were vacant. So what happens in vacant buildings? So if you're a parent, and Pete's here, he grew up here, his parents didn't let him go south of Broadway, because in his parents' mind, only bad things happen in vacant buildings, and from the kids' mind, it's a great place to play. It's a fun thing to happen.
Oh, yeah.
So you had this disconnect to the community that needed to be repaired as well. So we talked about this building you're in. The city didn't have the money to board up. and it was just empty. And Pete was, what, 16, 15, something like that, was pulling mattresses out of here and putting it on the sidewalk. And if sanitation didn't come in time, the mattresses were back in that night. So it was really a complete change. And I think, Phil, for George, I think George calls it his biggest philanthropic gift to the city. And so, when I stand on the corner of 35th Avenue with him and I look left and right, we get pretty happy, because what you see around here was thought out development, and with the recognition that we didn't need to own everything, but we needed to encourage it to happen.
Okay. So my last question, we're
Your
going to
legacy,
go.
Alan.
No,
Okay.
No, I'm just curious. I mean,
no, I knew the question. I was just
go ahead.
And I do not recall who said this, but if one has a reasonable aspirational goal in life, which is to take your time in this world and try to leave it a slightly better place than you found it, at this point I feel that I've accomplished that, because I see it in the faces of all the people that work around the studio. A lot of these people did not have these jobs beforehand, and then all of the other spin-off things that came as a result. I'm feeling Long Island City is in a better place, and so I just think that that's just all good stuff. And we didn't, I was kidding Hal before, saying he was so aspirational. I don't know that we ever thought of ourselves as aspirational in that way. We were just doing things that seemed to make sense.
Correct.
I love
And
that.
if you continue to do things that make sense, you know what? It seems to work out.
You followed your gut. All right, before we go to Q&A, I have just a few quick questions for you. 1, 2 answers. Ready? Now, with the pretense that you love all your children the same, there's a little edge. Where would you take an out-of-towner to dinner in Long Island City?
Oh, well, that's not fair, because we have a restaurant at the studio, so
All
obviously
right,
I would take them there.
outside of your immediate family.
Wow. That's not a fair question.
Why not?
The food is really terrific.
I
around
know,
here.
you could eat your way from day to night.
Well, actually, you could just eat your way
Around
right up and down the block here and be very happy.
Oh, he's being very
Okay,
PC.
You like that, very diplomatic?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
way too
I'm
diplomatic
sorry.
for me. Alan?
You want one answer, right?
1, baby.
Okay, you're going to get 4 restaurants real fast.
Hey. All right. Very Alan.
You're going to get Elias's Corner in Astoria. You're going to get Minetti's on Jackson Avenue. You're going to get Mandicotti's Rustica on Vernon Boulevard. And you're going to get one of the new entrants, which is Casa Enrique, which is one of our Michelin one-starred restaurants here in Long Island City that has got unusual Mexican at a fantastic price, and the food is friggin' fabulous.
Okay. Next. One store that you wish, or one type of retailer that you think the community would benefit tremendously from? What would that be? Anyone can answer.
Apple.
Apple?
I mean, I think if you look at an area like Steinway Street, it needs, and I know I'm answering it wrong, but if it needs an anchor to bring back retail, and here's where the city's got to come along to help, because you won't draw someone like that unless you're able to provide parking. And so.
Apple. Okay. Alan?
Okay, I'll only do 2 this time. More
We're working down.
supermarkets and more Dwayne Reedy kinds of places.
Okay. And last but not least, 3 words that you would use to describe Long Island City.
Cool, and cool.
All righty.
Great place to live, work, and capture on film.
All righty. Okay. You guys are great. Thank you. We're going to open it up now to anyone that might have any questions. We have any questions? Oh, yes. There is an ongoing sock.
First of all, I wanted to say you guys both have cool socks and nice boots.
Thank you.
But I'm going to ask kind of a tough question. You spoke a lot about the film, the tax credit, which I do think is a good thing, but I think it's a niche industry. If tax credits are given to every business and every type of development, we will perpetuate and make worse the problem we're having now, which is we're not getting a lot of the infrastructure needs we have taken care of. These include the roads and bridges. These include the fact that we don't have enough schools or community centers and green spaces. So I just want to push you a little bit on you're saying that, Alan, it was all about, for all the businesses, everyone's looking for the tax code and the way to make the greater profit. So where do we get the taxes we need for the infrastructure we need?
I'm going to take this one. Sheila, your premise is actually false. Okay? And it's false because there is an inference in your premise that taxpayers or the budget or what have you is taking a hit because of this particular program. In fact, on this particular program, okay, by the state budget office, this is the most.
Go any further, though. I wasn't criticizing this program.
No, but I'm addressing it for a reason, because you can't take a leap that if this works and then that, okay? Because I think you're mixing up really apples and pears. Because what the state gets back from this program is more money. When you have money that you saved, you put it in a bank or you put it in some other investment in order to get more money. If you were to give state tax credits to some other activity, all right, it may not produce that. The Film and Television Tax Credit Program is that's redundant, but it's unique in that it's the most efficient tax credit program that the state has put forth since whenever. So we all agree, but by the way, this program is providing more money for bridges, schools, and all the things you've referenced. It is not taking away from education or anything like that.
That's why I said it's a niche program.
Well,
Yes.
but let me answer it in a different way, okay? And Alan's right in the premise that it's an expenditure is really where it's wrong. It becomes an investment. I look at programs like this this industry, just as an example, had a skilled labor force and a basic infrastructure in place that without the tax credit program, that skilled labor force would have been gone. During that period I talked about, Louisiana had put in a tax credit. A lot of the key crew members from here to get work said, I'll go to New Orleans, I'll be the first call because I'm the experienced guy, and that helped really populate the talent base in terms of technical crews and things of that nature down in Louisiana. And I think the mistake that we make, and it's kind of what I referred to before, we've lost industries and we've lost skilled labor force because the government takes that mentality, or politically you take that mentality that says, I can't make the expenditure. And so over a period of time, that skilled labor force is gone. You got industries in which where it's generational. You know, the grandfather taught the father, taught the son, and it perpetuated industry upstate. And in fact, how many years was the New York City was not doing well, but the manufacturing was successful upstate, and it was driving the money and supporting downstate here in New York. And when things were cheaper in China or things were cheaper overseas, the government said, okay, go away. And the skilled labor force went, and the infrastructure went. And I think there's places to do this, and I think to grow tax base. And once you grow tax base, you grow money to fix the roads and the infrastructure. If you're just going to tax the people in this room or the developers that are looking to grow things, they'll find other places to go and put their money. So I think we have to be really careful and really smart on how we treat this, and we look at tax programs.
I mean, I think it's, no, and you guys are certainly much closer to this, but, I remember when there was a writer's strike, or, there was a question about what was going to happen with the renewal, and there were various studies done that documented what that lost revenue was, correct? I mean,
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Look, we had a show that picked up and went to Canada like that.
Right. Another, Gary.
So I want to address it to Hal or to Alan. You both
God
have
help us.
Oh God. You both have made investments, as Jill mentioned, in cultural institutions and the Long Island City Partnership, other not-for-profits. And that doesn't necessarily translate. You're not doing it because it translates into business for you. You could never make that investment and still do the same amount of business that you're doing now. And we all know that a lot of not-for-profits and cultural institutions, more and more in Queens, and they typically go back to the same coffers, to the same people that they know. So how would you, and what would you say to all of these new businesses here that have come to Long Island City and to Astoria as to why they should make those investments and why they should do the things that you've done in the past?
I can do that.
Good question.
That's for Hal.
Oh, go ahead. Because I've been pitching.
Listen,
pitching
I
it all
think for-
day.
That was just for you.
Yeah, but I think any business that comes into a community like this, you need to take care of the community around you. And the stronger the community is, the stronger you're going to be able to build business and have an environment that you want to be in. I mean, there was a panel here this morning was talking about how their employees originally went, what am I doing here? What's going on here? And the more that they put into place, some themselves, some introducing other things, whether they put in the coffee shop themselves, it started to change the mentality of folks. So I think it's really important. And it's not only about an institution like this, or where we sit on the board of the Queen's Council of the Arts or Exploring the Arts, which is did the Frank Sinatra School, but also in local healthcare. And you're part of the advisory board over at Mount Sinai with me, and we made an investment in there, or a contribution. And the theory was we're very embedded in this community, and for this community to be a strong and healthy community, it needs the arts, it needs healthcare, it needs all of these things because we're embedded in this community. So no, it doesn't bring us the next production. But it keeps the environment a very attractive place for everyone to be, whether I'm building an apartment building or an office building or asking for a production to come. And I think what's changed with all of this, the investment that Alan and his brother and yourself have made in time and money, because it's not just money, it's time. That we volunteer our time to these things. And what changes is, when I first came here, it was hard to get tenants. And the mentality was, the employer would say, I can't get employees to want to work in Queens. They all want to go to Manhattan. And that mindset has changed. And I think in terms of the big picture concept, what we always used to say, and we used to laugh about it, when Manhattan gets a cold, we get pneumonia. And I think what's changed now is when Manhattan gets a cold, we get a cold too. Okay? I think the old days of that we get pneumonia has kind of dissipated some. And I think a lot of that has to do with what you're talking about in terms of the cultural institutions, what Sheila has done in Long Island City, and the time and effort that she's put in, and others like her. The businesses that Silvercup has grown, and Kaufman has grown, and others that have come in to play to develop this area to be a great place to live.
I think it's a blended society.
Yeah.
It's not, I remember years ago, it would be like, I'm going to Queens, or I'm going to Brooklyn. I mean, it was like you were traveling hours and days, and it was like this monumental thing. And today, I'm going to Kaufman, or I'm going, I mean, I think that's...
I'm going to the outlet store.
I'm going to the outlet, yeah. I mean, or St. George, or this or that. And I think that is just such an extraordinary, an incredibly exciting opportunity for all of us, is to be able to build on that momentum and to be able to be what we call at Crain's, frankly, urban explorers, and to be able to test and try all the different neighborhoods and all the wonder that they bring. And that is what makes all of us so special, what makes New York so special and so unique, and what will continue to be able to help propel us, and to not have to be so explanatory when you're selling, when you think 30 years ago or 50 years ago when you were doing this and starting, you were trying to make
50 years ago?
30
Really?
years ago,
Really?
please.
I knew it was old.
When George was doing it 50 years ago, it's a whole different place. And it's, as a mom, it's very exciting to think about what my kids have in store for them over the next, 10, 20, 30 years. So, Hal and Alan, amazing. You guys are awesome. I thank you
You're
very
terrific.
much. Such a pleasure. It is now my pleasure to hand the mic over
Yes,
to Liz.
Jill, thank you so very, very much, and Alan and Hal as well. That was really terrific and a great way to wrap up today. We were very fortunate today that the Queens Film Festival has been taping all the sessions, so they're all going to be up on the web for us to view, as well as the highlights reels. So, because I know I missed a lot, but just a couple things that were said today, I could summarize from each panel, but I think a couple of key quotes. One, Seth said that this is a neighborhood that's having its moment, Seth Pinsky at the beginning, and I think we can all agree that that's true. But Bishop Taylor also said that it's time for the tides to rise together. And I think that that's also something that we would all agree with. And the challenge in the coming year and as ahead as we work on our plan and we plan for the next summit and so on is how do we make that happen? And that can't happen without all of you. And I think Alan's point about engagement is the key to both why Long Island City is so dramatically terrific today and why it will be so in the future, because we've got a great community that is engaged in a way that I really don't think I've seen in other neighborhoods before. So thank you, everyone, for being here and being engaged today, and I hope you'll be engaged in the long run. If you're not a member of the partnership, now's a great time to become one. Come to our other events. We're going to have a networking night in July, a business breakfast on green infrastructure in September, and our trade show in November 13th, which is going to have our wonderful keynote speaker, Senator Schumer. So I hope you will join us for that. Discounts for members to everything. I want to thank our sponsors again today. I mean, it's really important, not only financially, but also because we have a diversity of people involved, both as members and as sponsors, and that's very meaningful as we continue our work. I want to thank Josh and Eric for being true partners in putting this together last year and this year, and our Summit Planning Committee, many of whom are here, and they're in the program, was really terrifically helpful. The Museum of the Moving Image is a fantastic place to hold an event, and it's a fantastic place to visit, so everybody should come back and enjoy it some more. Bartleby and Sage Catering is just the bomb, and Sage General Store is a great place to experience their food on a daily basis. I want to thank all of our speakers and moderators and panelists and so on for giving us their time today. There's going to be a short survey sent out to everybody. Please do fill it in. We did use responses from last year to help shape this year. And I want to thank Joan Morgo, who produced the event for us this year, who did a really phenomenal job with great grace. I want to thank the amazing, tireless, and very small staff of the partnership. I see Dana, I see Javon, I see, who else? Joe and Charles. Special, you've all seen Ying, Jean, Cheryl, everybody else, and a very special thanks to our Director of Marketing and Events, Jenna Peacock, for marshaling us all here today. Thank you. And last thing, there's a gift bag as you leave. Please take it. If you didn't get a brownie, they're life-altering, so please make sure you get that. And thank you all very much. The summit is hereby closed.